The question that we're going to be dealing with on this episode is the election law discriminatory? And we'll get into why there are allegations that that's the case and what's going on with that. There's a case currently under appeals that deals with some of these nuanced issues. So I thought it was a good topic to get into, of course.
Nuance, I heard what you said.
There you go. This is Nuance, live and in person this time. Right. I'm Mike Scala, an attorney and an MC, joined as always by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop artist and the chair of BLM Tokyo. And yes, we are live in VA. What's going on, Jay?
Yes. One of those rare occasions where we get to do it live in the same room.
Yeah.
I guess we always do it live, but like in the same room.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's what's up.
Yeah. So let's talk about this because I practice election law, as our viewers and listeners know, and I like to follow what's going on with the latest developments in the field. And one of the issues that always seems to come up is this issue of nicknames on the ballot, right? Or even if you're an objector, a lot of people may not be thinking of it in terms of objectors besides just candidates, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, candidates are the ones trying to get the names on the ballot, but there's a whole system in place to challenge candidacies because the Board of Elections doesn't really verify signatures unless someone comes in and affirmatively challenges them, right? And so that's part of how you require or how you ensure that people meet the requirements to make the ballot, right? You have an objection system. Well, the objectors have to be voters and they have to be eligible to vote in that particular election to have standing to challenge a petition, right? So the objectors themselves have to use their names, and that needs to be verified, right? They have to be, like we said, to be a voter. So you cross-reference that to make sure that they're really voters. But what happens in the instance of nicknames? And this goes to candidates. It also goes to objectors, right? It's something that really has been part of the law and has developed interestingly along the way. So the easiest way to think of this is in terms of the candidates themselves, right? So when you want to get on the ballot, the question is, what name do you want to put on the ballot, right? So for example, people know me as Mike Scala, right? So if I were to petition as Mike Scala, right, would I be then on the ballot as Mike Scala? And the answer is yes. When it's a common nickname, this is where it gets murky, right? But when it's a common nickname that everyone kind of knows, especially in the US, to be a common nickname, right? Like Mike for Michael, Tim for Timothy, Jimmy or Jim for James. There's, a ton of, the wall. Right. Bob for Robert, et cetera, et cetera. Right. One of the major ones, actually, that was a test case in this was Marty from Martin, because the former borough president was Marty Markowitz. His full name was Martin. And when he petitioned as Marty, they challenged him, right? The opposition filed objections saying, wait a minute, there's no such person, Marty Markowitz. Right. They tried to knock him off the ballot for that, and it went to court.
Did he win?
He did win. And that's part of now the body of law that is used in this, right? And what came out of that is if it's a common nickname that everyone knows you by, because what happens is you go on the stand and you testify, listen, my name is Martin, but everyone calls me Marty, right?
Right.
And then you can introduce evidence that that's what you're commonly known by in your everyday life. Your neighbors can testify. When he comes out toward the grass, we say, hey, Marty. We don't say, hi, Martin. We say, Marty, that kind of thing. Right. So that's because it went to trial and it was challenged. And of course, when the Board of Elections takes action, you can sue to try to challenge what the board does in court, right? And so when it goes to court, you can have these hearings and testimony and that kind of stuff. But normally, the way it works is the Board of Elections will just automatically accept you. It doesn't have to go to court, right? They'll just accept it, right? We did Mike Scala. They just put us on the ballot as Mike Scala because people knew, okay, a voter at that address is Michael Scala, and it's understood that Mike is Michael, right? The question becomes now, what if it's someone with a nickname that isn't common? And this is why the questions of being discriminatory arise.
Or a non-English name.
Exactly. Not non-Anglo, for example.
Right.
And the board typically will knock you off if they don't recognize that as a common nickname. But again, what's common, it may be common in that other culture and someone else's culture. Right. It may not be common in the US, right? So they'll typically knock you off, and then you as a candidate has to file a lawsuit to try to get back on. And that's when you do the whole thing about everyone calls me this, or this is a common name in my culture, that kind of thing. You got to prove it yourself. Now, of course, I never had to prove Mike is Michael, but if you're from another culture, and we've seen this with Korean candidates, we've seen it with Muslim candidates, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of thing, or of Indian descent, where it's like the nickname isn't so readily understood by the Board of Elections,
right?
And And so it creates this effect where if you're from another culture, right, that's not Anglo, it's not American, if you wish, there's more of a burden on you in the law,
Right.
which is discriminatory, right? And it certainly appears to be that way. So there was a law that was passed a few years ago in New York, and they tried to address this, but it was still, it was still basically the framework of can you show that that's you, right? That you're the
Right.
same person. You shouldn't be kicked off the ballot for that, but you still have the burden of showing that that is your nickname. Again, I don't have that burden, right? Bobby doesn't have that burden. And we could look at presidential candidates, even, right? When I went to vote for president over the years, I saw nicknames on the ballot. I'm not sure if Joe Biden did Joe Biden or he did Joseph R. Biden.
I think it was
I think he might have done
Joe.
Joseph. I'm
Really?
not sure. It might have been different times as well.
That's
I
true.
do believe that Tim Kaine, when he was running for vice president, just did Tim Kaine. I
Right. Is his
believe
name Timothy?
it's Timothy, but I think he
Okay.
just did Tim Kaine.
Yeah.
I believe Bill Clinton might have just done Bill Clinton as opposed to William J. Clinton. I've seen nicknames used.
Right.
Oh, another one that I recall, Mike Pence. He didn't put Michael Pence. He put Mike Pence
Right.
on there, right?
Yeah.
In New York, there was no burden on them to prove that's who they were. Everyone just understood it. They accepted it.
Right.
Oh, yeah, Mike Pence. We know that that's Michael. What do we even do, right? It wasn't even a question.
Right.
And I'm not saying we should be putting more burden on any candidates or anybody here. I don't think the answer is for me to have to provide paperwork to show that Mike is Michael, because that does seem silly. But at the same time, how do you handle the situation when other people do have that burden?
Right. Well, I think that's part of being a multicultural country
Mm-hmm.
is to understand that there's not just one way, right? There's not just one
Yeah.
nickname sort of structure here, right? So there's going to be different names. There's going to be different languages, even that people use, and so it should be less of a hurdle
Mm-hmm.
to put those on the ballot than it might be presently, depending on what it is.
Right. Now, I mean, is the answer here to allow people to put whatever they want? Because I think what they're trying to do is make sure that that's a real nickname that you actually go by to prevent you from just putting any name you want on the ballot, right? Like, if my name is Mike Scala, should I just be able to make up a name and say, well, I want to be on the ballot as John Scala, even though that's not me? And say, well, that's my nickname. But again, if I can prove that that's what I'm known by in everyday life, that's
Right.
one thing. But should you be able to just put whatever you want, even if it isn't a legitimate nickname?
That reminds me of, I don't know, about, I guess it was maybe 10 years ago, maybe less than 10 years ago,
Yeah.
when Facebook was trying to really force the real name
Right.
identity on
Right.
there. And for people who didn't either have, again, common nicknames or had different names, stage names, performers,
Yeah.
that they were being forced to either prove it or change it to the real name. I was locked out of my account
Mm-hmm.
because my Facebook account has my MC name on it, even though pretty much anyone that knows me from New York would know me by my MC name
Right.
instead of that. But anyone that knows me outside of New York probably knows me by
Right.
my given name.
Right.
And so they locked me out for like half a year for that. So this
Yeah.
kind of reminds me of something like that.
Sure. Sure.
Because it wasn't just stage names, but it was, again, people with non-English sounding names
Yeah.
or things that
Right.
weren't very
Right.
common.
Right.
We're getting caught up in this idea to use your real name, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah. But do you think people should be allowed to run for office using whatever name they want, even if it isn't a nickname they go by in their everyday life? Or, let's say it's not even something like John and you're Michael. What if it's, Candy? What if it's just a word? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I want to be known as a chair scholar. I mean, should you just be able to pick whatever you want, or should there be some kind of limitation?
It's something to think about, right? Like,
Yeah.
the first thing that I think that comes to mind for me is, why would they use a name that they don't go by? What would be the benefit for them? I think it would be more of a drawback
Yeah.
potentially.
Well, one thing could be if they're in a certain district, and maybe they wouldn't pick a random word, but maybe they're trying to make a name that sounds more palatable to voters of a given area or something.
Okay, okay, I suppose so. Like, if you're like in a heavy Mexican district, you're gonna be like, oh, I'm Pedro Scala.
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
But I guess
And then,
In the long run, I don't know if that would benefit the candidate for someone to really go that far.
what
But
about what about a last name? What if I don't even go? I mean, should you just be able to put whatever you want on the ballot, right? Instead
there,
of Pedro Scala, I'm Pedro Sanchez now. I mean, should that be allowed?
but that's actually, you know what, the it sounds funny,
Yeah.
but um, when people campaign, when campaigns go through and look at the voter rolls,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes they will look at the last names to
Right.
kind of get an idea
Sure.
of what um, community they're from, right?
Right.
Are they Italian?
Right.
Are
Right.
they
Right.
Hispanic? Are they, Asian? And so they'll go by that. So in that case, someone could, I guess, utilize that. I think ultimately, though, that would probably come out in the wash. You know what I mean? Like when they hit the stage, the debate stage or the interviews, and they're
you
like,
you would hope. Okay, so there was a candidate in my part of Queens, right? He ran for state senate. His name was Albert Baldeo,
okay,
and he did very well in Italian areas because people thought that that was an Italian name.
right,
And it turns out that he is not Italian at all. He's Guyanese of Indian descent.
okay,
And I believe that he took steps to conceal his actual likeness because he wanted voters in those
mm,
areas to think he was Italian, right? So he didn't put his picture on the palm cards. He wouldn't show up to debates. Someone else would show up and say, "Sorry, Albert has another engagement tonight," that kind of thing. And it did work for him. And he didn't end up winning, but he came very close.
okay, okay. Um, I mean, it's kind of hard to think about. I would want to say, yeah, people should be able to use
Mm-hmm.
whatever name that they go by,
Mm-hmm.
which
But go by and whatever you want are two different things, also.
that's very true.
Yeah.
That's very true. Um, hmm. I'm just not seeing the benefit of using a name that's not really associated with you.
Right, right. I agree. I think there should be some baseline requirement that at least is
All
a
right.
bona fide nickname, right? Like when you're running for office and you have to put your address, they're actually pretty lenient as to what address you use, as long as you can show it's a bona fide residence
All right.
and not a sham, right?
Right.
That's the standard, legal standard. And it doesn't have to be where you reside most of the time. If you spend one night a week here and 6 nights a week there, then I could be like, oh, you got to use that one because you're there more often. No,
Right.
you could have a beach house somewhere and only go there every few months and still use it as a legal address to run for office, right?
All right.
Like I said, the bar is very low, but there is a bar, right?
Right.
It's like it's low enough to step over it, but it's still there. So maybe it should be similar with the nickname situation where it needs to be an actual nickname that you go by. But and that's kind of where it is. But then you still have the issue of some people having to prove that that's a real nickname and some people
Right.
not having to prove it, right? And how do you get around that?
That becomes an issue.
Yeah.
Because it'll put that kind of undue burden on people who don't have like that so-called common name.
Right.
Um, I guess one way you could do is maybe if the Board of Elections updated, had a list
Right.
of common nicknames
Sure.
for different cultures and different names. Like for example, like Mike is nickname for Michael. We
Yeah.
know that in the United States,
Right.
but someone, I don't know who, Takao,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
might say call me Taka.
Right.
If that's common, maybe
Yeah.
there should be a list somewhere, and I'm sure there's a list of
Right.
nicknames.
Right.
Maybe it's something that
That is a
Board of
good
Elections
idea.
could
Yeah, yeah.
implement.
And I don't think they really use that. Like I said, I think it's more the Anglo nicknames they just know. So
Right.
maybe there should be a more
And
expansive list.
that begs the question, like, is it a discriminatory or is it just familiarity?
Well, there may not be discriminatory intent,
Right.
but I think
It
the effect of
is
right,
discriminatory.
is a disparate impact there. You know what, though? I actually like where you're going with this. What if, to make it fair,
Mhm.
right, you had a very long list of names that was posted to the Board of Elections website in advance,
Mhm.
and they let you know these are the nicknames that we will automatically let you go by without a pass, like without having to prove
Right.
it, right? Would like this is just a free ride here. Mike, Michael, and all the ones that we know, plus, and they have from all different cultures. Obviously, it's not going to be everyone, but at least everyone will know the rules going into the game, right? They'll be
And
like,
it could
okay,
cut down on challenges based on that.
right. And then and by the way, there could be some quote unquote Americanized nicknames that might not make the cut either.
Right.
But at least you'll know if you have that list, you'll be like, okay, I'm not on this this pre-approved list, so I'm going to have to take affirmative steps to prove that it's me.
Right. Now that also brings to mind, it brings two things. One, I was just thinking a lot of people when they move from China
Mm-hmm.
to the United States, they have their legal Chinese name, but
Yeah.
they take an American name.
Right.
So which would they use on there?
It's
Right.
supposed to be the name that they're signed up to vote under, because
Okay.
that's the one that they cross-reference, right? The Board of Elections looks at their records.
But that would be similar to a nickname because,
Yeah.
you know, in their life in the United States, they may go by John, but their real
Yes.
name might be, you know, GE or
Yes.
something like that.
Right. But the question is, how are they signed up to vote? So you'd have to
Right.
look at what's on their driver's license, for example. Right.
So could that be? I mean, that, you know, if it's the same what they're signed up to vote as.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to run for office, you have to run under the name you're signed up to vote as.
So
as
I
well.
actually, that's an interesting point. I actually advised a candidate once who was dealing with this issue. Right. They had their born name, their real name right from birth, and then their American name that they went by in the U.S.
Right.
And they were concerned that when they ran for office with the name that they go by in the U.S., they'll be challenged and end up in court having to prove a stem. And obviously, even if you win that case, it's costly and it takes up your time.
Absolutely.
Right. So it puts a burden on you. And so they were asking me, what should they do to avoid that? And I advised them, if you can, change your voter registration to that name, and no one will ever challenge it. And that's what happened, and it worked for them. But
So,
not everyone may be able to do that, because you are supposed to use your real name. But if people are using their American name on their driver's license and on everything, all that paperwork in the U.S., then they should have no problem signing up to vote that way.
Okay, here's another possibility. When someone is, you know, signs up to run for office, on that application or the forms that you submit, you've got your legal name, and they should be maybe add a line for, you know, nickname or name you go by. So the Board of Elections has that information already.
But that goes back to the same issue. Should you be able to put whatever you want on there? What if you know you're going to run for office? You know, what if my last name is Gordon? I put nickname Flash when I sign up to vote. This way I can run for office as Flash Gordon. You know what I mean? Like, should you be able to do that, or should there be some kind of bar to show that that's legitimate?
I don't see why that would be a problem.
Okay.
But
as long as you're telling them in advance, that's what your intention is.
Right. But I say but because there's always someone that finds a way to really twist it
and mess it up for everybody,
to where it's like, okay, we didn't think about that.
Okay, so here's an example of how this might be used in a devious manner, right? If you just are very lax with the rules.
Right.
What if you find someone with the same last name as another candidate who's in the running, and you say, just run under the same first name as them? Now you have two people on the ballot with the same exact name, and it'll confuse voters.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I think, but what would happen if it was two people just, and that was their real names, and they were running that way?
That would be a problem. You wouldn't want that.
Yeah. How would they deal with that in that situation?
What if they're? Oh, I see what you mean.
If they're
both have the same exact name,
and they're both in the same party,
and both the same, that could be a problem. I actually haven't seen a situation like that ever arise. I'm sure they would need to do something to differentiate between them. Maybe put an address or something in there. Or, I mean, I hope it wouldn't be
Tom Smith 1, Tom Smith 2.
I mean, you know, you could always educate the voters, or try to, right? Like, my name is the first one on the ballot, his is the second one, the last one, or whatever. But that would be difficult.
In that situation, I would imagine the candidate might want to use a nickname if possible, to differentiate themselves from the competitor there.
Right.
Now, here's another one. Yeah. This could be used for, not, I guess nefarious is kind of an apt word. Okay, let's say that the person is running as a candidate, and they put down that their nickname is Donald Trump to get name recognition.
Right.
To you know what I mean? Yeah. Just to get those votes, just because the name is there, which I think would be effective in some cases.
In some cases, there was a movie, an Eddie Murphy movie. You know, I forget the name of it now. So the premise of it is, if I'm not mistaken, a longtime congressman dies, and his wife wants to run for the seat, and there are people who want to stop that, and so they find Eddie Murphy's character, which is like just a random person with the same name as the congressman, right? And they say, we'll put you on the ballot because voters will think it's still the congressman. And then he was campaigning, vote for such and such, the name, like that was the thing.
I forget what movie that was, but that's that type of situation.
Right.
So I think, I mean, I don't know, I guess I can't think of the other loopholes that people might try to use, but I would imagine the easiest would be to have a line on there where the candidate fills out names that they go by, so that when a petition arrives or someone objects, the Board of Elections says, well, we already are familiar that this is the name that you use. So
Sure. Except you can just do that when you know you're going to run for office. So at that point, do you even need that extra step of
that's what I
making them
mean.
do that?
That's what I mean.
So
Like the
why do you need
candidate,
to make them? They can just put whatever they want on their petition. And it's just one extra step, but it's just more paperwork they have to fill out. There's still no legal bar if you're just letting them choose whatever name that they want.
right?
You know,
Well, I mean, yeah,
I do like the idea though of having a pre-approved list. Of course, there are going to be some people saying, "Well, how come mine isn't on there?" But
right.
you're not going to, you'll never have every single nickname in the world
And
on
then
there.
some people are going to be like, well, why does William get two nicknames? Like, you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it could yeah, several. Bill, Billy, right? Will. Yeah,
Willie, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Which is
true.
uh, Will Smith's real name is actually Willard.
Willard.
It's
There's
not
another
even
one.
so.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. And then you have a lot. Even I know Italian people. They have Americanized names, and you think that that's
right,
short for a longer version of an American name, but it's not. Right?
right,
Like, I don't know. Like, yeah. For example, my grandfather was Gennaro, but he went by Jerry.
right,
You know what I mean? So you can have situations like that. Or for example, if you go by Joe, you might think it's short for Joseph, but it could be like Giuseppe or something like that.
right,
You
right.
know,
Yeah.
Jay.
Yeah.
You might think Jay is Jason or something
Yeah, it
else,
could
right?
be a bunch of different
Yeah,
things, and
yeah,
and you'd probably be wrong in every one of
right, right,
them.
right. Uh, you know,
So,
so yeah, that's a good example. Your name probably would not be on that pre-approved list that was generated because I don't think it's common enough.
um, my full name probably would not be,
Right,
but my what I usually go by, or most people have grown up going by Jay.
Jay.
I don't think that would be. I guess they'd still challenge it, be like, well, even though Jay is a commonly known
It's not
name,
your name,
it's not your
right? It's not common for your
legal
name.
name. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So that would be an issue. And again, we've seen this, I think, with other issues. There's really no perfect solution here.
right,
It's just what's the best you can do with it.
right.
So let me ask about this because there's a case under appeal right now in New York where they're looking at not the candidate's nickname, but the objector, right? There's an objector. I believe his full name is Leonid. It's like Leonard, but it's a Russian dude. It's
Mhm.
Leonid, like Leonid or something, or
Okay.
Leonid, something to that effect. He goes by Lenny,
Okay.
right? And he signed the objection form, right? Like we said, if you want to challenge someone's signatures, you have to fill out forms. First, you do a general objection, which is just a one-page form saying that I am raising an objection to this petition, and it
Mhm.
gives you time. It gives you 3 days. Actually, it gives you 6 days. You have 3 days to file that general objection, and
Mhm.
then once you file that, you have 6 days to file what are called specific objections, and that's when you go line by line and you actually make your challenges to the petition, right? So you do the general, which basically is like a signal that they're looking at it, they might be doing something, and then you do the specifics. If you think you have enough to knock them below the threshold or to find some other reason you should be challenging them. So this guy, he signed his objection forms, both the general objection and the specific objections, as Lenny and his last name,
Mhm.
right? Now, those objections are being challenged because the argument there is that,
Who's this guy?
yeah, that a nickname should not be admissible for an objector. And they cite the cases showing how a candidate can do that, but they're saying that there's a higher bar to knock someone off the ballot, right? When you run for office,
I can see that though.
yeah, when you run for office, they're saying that it's been liberalized, right? Under Mario Cuomo, when he was governor, they liberalized the election law, and now there's a presumption of validity. They want to make it easier. They want to make ballot access easier for people.
Right.
They don't want people to be knocked off the ballot unless there's a damn good reason to knock them off, right? So
Right.
they presume that you're good until proven otherwise.
Right.
So there's a lower bar, I guess you could say, for a candidate than there is for an objector. If you look at the burdens of the objectors, they're commonly held to what's called strict compliance, right? Like if you're going to object, if you're going to try and knock someone off, you better cross every T and dot every I and follow the damn rules because we want to presume they're good unless you can really show that they shouldn't be. So the argument there is,
That makes sense to me so far.
yeah, conceptually it makes sense,
Yeah.
and I agree. But the argument now is, should the objector not be allowed to object without using their full name? Why should they be afforded the privilege of using a nickname, right? The candidate may have a few reasons for it. Number one, like we said, lower bar, presumed good until shown otherwise. Also, the candidate is the one whose name needs to appear on the ballot. So that's why they might want to use a nickname, because people know them as such. And
Right.
so it's the people who are going to the polls to vote. And, people want to be on the ballot as what they're known by in the community. That makes sense.
Right.
Why does the objector need to use their nickname? People aren't voting for the objector. This is just a legal form to verify the person is a real voter, right? And
Right.
so that's why the argument is that they shouldn't be allowed to use their nickname. And
I can
thus
see it though.
far, both the Board of Elections and the lower court said they were allowed to use their nickname just as a
Mhm.
candidate is, but it's under appeal now in the appellate court, and they're arguing that they shouldn't be able to.
I could see I could see a reason for them not to be able to use
Yeah.
their nickname,
Yeah.
and for like you just outlined, as far as like the candidate being able to, for
Hmm.
easier ballot access, to get
Right.
more people involved in the democratic process,
Right.
to all of that stuff, to exercise their rights, and for the people not to use one, the objectors not to use one. I could see someone, you know, because people try to knock people off the ballot as a strategy
Hmm.
to burn up their campaign
Oh,
funds, to
sure.
burn up their time. And so going in with a nickname or something that doesn't have your name, that shows readily your
Hmm.
identity is readily understable, could be used as a
Right.
strategy,
Right.
right?
It's kind of like throwing a rock and hiding your hand almost.
Right, in that type
Right.
of situation.
Yeah.
So I can see it. To me, it can make sense, to say, no, you need to use your legal name
Yeah.
when you're doing this objection, and you're trying to pull someone off the ballot who is exercising their right to run for office. You're
Sure.
trying to pull them off of that.
Right.
So I
Right.
can see
I can
that.
see that as well. On the other hand, it's kind of like a come on. You know what I mean? Like some things are commonly abbreviated. Like
Sure, sure, sure.
street becomes ST, avenue becomes AV or AVE, Michael becomes Mike. It's like just like common in society that
Right,
when
right,
you
right,
see this, it means that. And should we be this technical about it? Should we be saying that you can't participate in the democratic process in this way, right? Because we
right,
know that the candidate is part of the process and the voters are as well. The objector does have a say in it, or should have a say in it as well. They're participating in a process. Should we be precluding them from the process over
right,
something that may seem a little bit petty? It's we get it. You're Leonard, but everyone knows you as Lenny. You wrote Lenny. You always write your name Lenny.
right.
Should we be holding your objection and your participation invalid based on what could seem like a technicality there?
Right, and I get that. I get that too. The only thing I'm looking at is that, because we know that people use this as a strategy
Yeah.
to get people off the ballot, to use up their funds, to waste their time,
Right.
to distract from them being able to actually effectively campaign. And so I can see why there might be a higher bar there.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
but if at the present, has it always been allowed that they could use nicknames up until this challenge? Really?
Well, it hasn't really been litigated to this degree when it comes to the objector, right? There's
Right,
been a lot of litigation about the candidates, what the candidates are allowed to do,
right,
and like we said, even new legislation saying that you should be able to use a nickname and you should be able to freely ballot the access the ballot as long as you can show that that's really you and it's not some sham nickname, but it really is your nickname. You
right,
should be allowed to use it. So we're now seeing really for the first time this being challenged to this level at the objectors angle, but from the objectors perspective. But normally, like we said, it just goes through. Like if they understand that to be your name, they don't question it.
right. So I would say, if up until now it hasn't been an issue,
Yeah.
maybe this is just a one-off thing right now. I know since it's under litigation, there has to be a decision made.
Hmm.
I could see a case for just saying, you know what, it's okay to use the nickname. So far it hasn't been a problem. Right now, just it could be that you guys are going at each other,
Right.
and so let's move forward. If it starts to become more of a problem, then there might be more of a need to put like a definitive line in the sand.
Right. And maybe there needs to be legislation clarifying this.
Right. So,
So, all right, so let's put it to the people. We wanted to really ask about this nickname issue. And I guess the context is it discriminatory? Does it overly burden people, right? Where do you draw the line? Because we had that issue earlier of, well,
right.
if you just let people do whatever they want, that could be abused, or you can have undesired results there as well. So what was the question? Should people be able to use whatever nickname they want? How are we going to frame this? Should they, well, I think we were going to say, should they be forced to use their full name, right?
Right. Should candidates and
Yeah.
objectors be forced to use their full legal name? What was it?
When participating in the democratic process, really.
Okay. So,
yeah.
All right. Run it all together. Take two.
Let's put it together. All right. So the poll question of the week is, should candidates and objectors be required to use their full legal names when participating in the democratic process?
Okay. So, okay, we'll see what people have to say about that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. All right. Well, speaking of polls, right, we had some polls.
We had quite a few polls.
Okay.
Well, we got two of them.
All right.
So let's, I'm going to have to pull these up here. Let's see here. 1 second. We've got two that we can talk about. We've had some responses on both of them here. So the first one was when we had Father Craven on. We talked about the bus fare issue, the bus fare evasion issue. It was like about 50% of people, of riders, don't pay the bus fare, and so we asked the question: should more be done to combat fare evasion, or should we eliminate fares on mass transit, even if that means increasing taxes? So we had two answers, possible answers here: do more to combat fare evasion, or eliminate bus fares, even if that means raising taxes. Which do you think people chose?
I believe they said eliminate fares on mass transit, even if that means increasing taxes.
Ooh, okay.
I think you'll get more people.
I would have thought people would say do more to combat fare evasion because they wouldn't want their taxes raised, but
not from how people have been answering these polls lately. And again, it depends on where the voters in these polls are coming from. But here we go. I just see on the result. Wow.
So 30% said do more to combat fare evasion. 70% said eliminate bus fares, even if it means raising taxes.
See, I can see if we posed this question to voters of my city council district, that would probably be flipped. Right. But it depends on what your audience is. This is posted on the Daily Coast. And we've seen these respondents to be a little bit more on the progressive side.
Right.
And so I think that's what you're getting here.
Right. I would imagine, I would imagine someone more, you probably have a mix, someone that's more moderate, but then if it's conservative, they're going to be like, no, enforce what's going on there and make them, pay their stuff. So, yeah, I guess it's not really that surprising in that regard. So we did have a number of comments down here. Well, I said it in the write-up. I said that it doesn't seem that MTA is doing much about infrastructure upgrades, and this person came in and countered, so that's not true. So that was a side, an aside there. This person says making adding the threat of jail time for repeat offenders and fare evasion would drop. I think, I don't know if that's, I don't know if that would, the problem, they're not getting caught.
That's the thing. They're just getting on the bus, as we heard from Chris McDonough, Father Craven. They're getting on the bus. They're staring him down like, what are you going to do about it? And he's told, the bus drivers are told to not do anything. Now, I think they're taking reports. That's how they're getting the data, right? They're saying this many people aren't paying the fares, and they can try to use that to justify more funding or whatever. But there is no enforcement. So how could you have a threat of jail time for repeat offenders if they're not being even caught the first time or at all?
Right.
I'm thinking about physical mechanism. I know I was thinking about that when Chris was on talking about it, but could there be some kind of turnstile-like mechanism, or basically the door doesn't even open for you until you pay?
Yeah, but that works if it's just one person at the stop. What if it's a line of people? Right. The door is going to open the first time.
Can it shut and open in between everyone? Person? Yeah.
I don't think that would work on the bus.
Well, the bus itself could stay open, but on the street, there could be some kind of barricade. You have to cross through.
Okay. So basically, instead of having the bus stop open on the street side, have like a turnstile-ish
at the bus stop,
kiosk
at the bus stop. Right. So you can't even get to, it's hard because you're an open road,
then they'd have to
walk around it. Right. It would be tough logistically.
It'd be expensive as well.
It would be expensive. Yeah.
So,
but what about the bus pulls up to this area? Because there could be a limited space between the bus door, right, the opening of the bus, and whatever mechanism you're installing. And so while the bus door stays open, you have to pass through this blockade of some sort, which can open and close with every person.
Yeah, I don't know if that would work though. I mean, imagine how many people are taking the bus
Right, right.
every, and then
It
in
would
the
slow things
morning,
down.
when they're trying to get to work, it would really
I
slow
mean, but it's
stuff
what you have on
down.
a subway, right? It's the same kind of deal.
That's true. That's true too. Um,
Maybe you can, I don't know, it's tough. I was thinking like, to save time, they can pay when they get to the bus stop and it puts them in some kind of area. So they're
right,
waiting now in an area that's already been paid. I don't know.
right.
Again, it is expensive to do this, but
It,
how much money is the city? How much money is the system losing on fare evasion?
right,
Almost $1 billion a year, right? Maybe more.
right. Yeah.
So it may be worth spending some money on this.
Or at least exploring some different options on how
Yeah,
to make that happen. I
yeah.
think, ultimately anything that you do, someone's probably going to find a way to get around it.
Somebody is, but it doesn't mean you do
Um,
nothing, right?
right. Maybe it could also be a part of uh, culturally,
Yeah,
you know, I don't think other places have that issue to this degree.
right, right.
50% aren't paying. So it also says something about the culture in the city that's just like, screw
Yeah.
that, if I don't
Well,
have to.
yeah, right. But also, it got out of hand, and it was allowed to get out of hand.
Right,
Right
right,
now, it's like almost like you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube because it's so out there that
right, right,
like we
right.
said, 50%.
That's
So
crazy.
now, yeah, it's like
Yeah,
we're so far gone at this point.
right.
It should have been controlled in the first place.
Now, someone here said, wouldn't it make more sense to eliminate fares on the Long Island Railroad so many needed workers in
Mm,
the city can find more affordable housing rather than uh, cooping them in the city proper?
yeah.
And then someone responded, what makes you think there's affordable housing on Long Island? And it's a good point.
Right.
Like, and I see what they're going with that. Like, okay, if it's free, then people will move a little bit out of the city. It'll be less crowded. They just commute. But it's expensive everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the people who are able to do that are commuting uh, as possible, even if there is, and that also takes assumes that there are easy commute paths
Right.
from the location. Like we often talk about Rockaway. It's
Sure.
like,
Sure. And listen, there are a lot of people who take the Long Island Railroad who appreciate the fact that it's not cheap, believe it or not, because they
really,
think it keeps the crowds controllable. I mean, oftentimes those trains get packed as is, but the idea is if that a lot of people believe that the reason why it's somewhat controlled is because of the fare. And so if it was more accessible to everyone, then those trains would be inaccessible.
well, I'm gonna go on record to say those people are crazy because I used to dislike with a passion how expensive it was to take
Sure.
the Long Island
It is
Railroad
expensive. It's
to
very
go
expensive.
into
Yeah.
Manhattan, and I wasn't deep in Long Island. I was
Right.
right on the
Right.
border
Right.
of
Right.
Queens and Long Island.
But the system wasn't really set up to get you there.
Right, because
Yeah.
yeah, the New York City system is basically was set to send people into
To Manhattan.
Manhattan, not
Yeah.
to go between boroughs,
Right.
pretty
Right.
much.
Right.
So it just was expensive to get in. I think back then it was even like $15,
Oh, sure.
something like that, and I
Peak
can't imagine
zone,
now.
peak hours. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably more now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So part of the reason why Queens Link decided to push for the subway plan, right? Because the Rockaway Beach branch was actually a branch of the Long Island Railroad. And so
Uh-huh.
for a long time, a lot of people were saying, bring that back the way it was as a branch of the Long Island Railroad. But when Queens Link came along, they said, why don't you make it a new subway line? You can still use the infrastructure that was there, right? Which was part of the railroad system, but do that as a new subway connection because more people would be able to afford it. That was really the thing.
Right. So there's a thing here. Someone is saying that people can't afford the bus fare. People in the boroughs in Harlem, where
Mm-hmm.
working families live, they live on low wage jobs, so they can't afford that. And they're talking about they didn't raise the minimum wage, but New
Mm-hmm.
York did raise the minimum wage, so
Right.
that's
Right.
not right. But someone countered that and said, then make the fare free for city residents.
Mm-hmm.
So what if it's free for city residents and then out of
I
towners
think
pay the
you're
fare?
talking about the bus still. I think there's still mostly people who live in the city who take it.
Right, but yeah, that's true. I was thinking the tourists would be
I don't. Yeah.
paying,
Do you think
but
tourists are the ones skipping up? They probably don't know they can get away with it,
that's
right?
what I'm saying. So
Yeah. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
it's free for the residents,
Right.
and
It
maybe
already is free for the residents because they're the ones who aren't paying, right?
true, and I guess tourists probably aren't taking the bus as much. They're
No,
probably
not as
taking
much.
subway
Yeah.
more than they're taking the
Yeah.
bus.
Or an Uber or something.
Right. Um, And someone said, "How about taking money out of the NYPD's outrageously bloated budget? You can have a budget. You can have budget priorities that don't involve raising taxes." This is the one I told
Oh
you
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah.
You can have budget priorities that don't involve raising taxes. It seems like you're going after Mamdani in a manipulative fashion.
Well, hold on a second. It's not first of all, this isn't a Mamdani question, but it's not
At all.
manipulative either, because wasn't he the one who said he would pay for it by raising taxes on the wealthiest? Because he proposed free buses.
Right.
Yeah.
And Mamdani wasn't mentioned at all
No.
in this.
No.
And this person also quoted, they said, it seems like you're trying to go after Mamdani, especially in conjunction with your other recent post, which is
Okay.
the one we're going to get to next,
Okay.
is the other poll. And that one was about the election. And that one also wasn't about Mamdani. It
Right.
was about Cuomo and
Well,
Adams.
that one's more about him in an indirect manner, I would say. Yeah.
I only mentioned him as really to say he won the primary. That was it. The
But
rest
the question
was about,
of at least between those two, like, why should one of them drop out, would be because they would want to get all the support around one candidate to be an alternative to Mamdani. That was really the thing.
right.
Yeah.
But even that in that case, it wasn't about talking down about Mamdani.
Right.
It's about
Right.
Should
right.
these guys get out of the race?
Right. And we're talking about issues that are going on right now.
Right,
Like,
right.
why would we ignore the issues that are happening? Like, how does that help anyone?
Right. So yeah, I don't get where they were going with that. That was kind of crazy.
But this is, I think, endemic, right? It's something that you see with certain people, right? Like, they want to make everything be about their narrative,
Yes.
right? And they want to spin whatever you do to suit, and it's like, and they're just, I don't know. Some people just like they have like tunnel vision, right? And it's like they can't appreciate nuance, which is what we try to bring to the table here.
Absolutely. I'm not going to read this one here. This guy said there was a former MTA worker, and he went and wrote like a whole dissertation.
I see that, yeah.
And it was, it was actually really good. I did read it.
Yeah.
He laid out a bunch of different reasons why this might be difficult and this and that, and so that was good.
So what about the idea of the cop or the security of some sort on every bus?
Yeah, that was one thing we did talk about. That might be the immediate, the one that could be implemented easiest immediately. Probably, and I would say maybe in the beginning of the program, they'd have to be on every bus. And then over time, a year or so, over time, when people start to realize, okay, wow, they're taking this seriously, then maybe they could be like,
like eased off a little bit.
Eased off.
Yeah.
Or just, because they wouldn't be on their, or maybe they'd be undercover on the bus. You know what I mean? Just like on airplanes where they have the air marshals,
right,
where they look like regular passengers.
Right.
And so,
I see. So you wouldn't know. So yeah. So you get on the bus thinking maybe there's a cop here. I just don't see him.
Right. So the first year, you're gonna have the cop in there, full uniform. He's right there by the front.
Right.
Right. And then maybe in the second year, after the public has start to learn, okay, they're really taking this seriously. Then they say, okay, we're gonna still have them on there, but they're gonna be undercover.
Sure.
And then then maybe it starts to incrementally get more people to pay for it.
That's true.
That might be
that could be something to look at.
Yeah, something to look into.
Yeah.
In that regard. So, very interesting. As you see, there was a lot of conversation that took place on here.
Very engaging conversation, it looks like.
Yeah. So
it just seems to me that something needs to be done, right? And we basically laid out, you can go this route or that route, but you got to do something. The system we have now is so not working, right? When you have
something
a bus
has to be tried
with the fare and 50% are not paying, and it's costing billions of dollars, right? And obviously all this money that we're losing could be spent elsewhere, and this is holding us back as a city, as a society. No, this is not a sustainable system. So you either gotta say we can't do enforcement and we have to just make it free, even if that means raising taxes somewhere, or you've got to try to ramp up enforcement. I think what I said last time was, I don't think we've exhausted our options when it comes to trying to get a handle on this. So maybe it's not time to throw up our hands and give up. Maybe we should look into doing more to enforce.
Okay. Well, this guy says the city has Manhattan, raise taxes. He wrote, what did he say here? I'm sure NYC can figure out how to upscale, especially with revenue that Manhattan can generate. Add $1 to the price of every parking garage. Barely a difference between $50 for a day or $51 for a day.
Well, those aren't city-run garages, though.
Plus,
those are privately owned.
Those are already ridiculously expensive.
Already ridiculous. Yeah. And that's the thing. See, this doesn't sit right with me because the proposal here, right?
I know what you're going to
Not
say.
just with this one, but what they're saying is we have a problem that's out of control because people are not paying their fares, right? They're abusing the system, if you wish. And they're saying the only way to get a handle on that is to make it harder on everyone else who isn't necessarily abusing the system, right? I mean,
Right.
people who are driving, maybe they're not taking the bus at all, but
Right.
you're making it harder on them because people don't want to pay their fare they're supposed to. I mean, how is that
Right.
right?
I thought you were going to go a different route
Mhm.
with it, because with this proposal, what this guy's saying, like, raise the parking garages by $1.
Mhm.
What that essentially is making the drivers who aren't taking the bus pay for the people to
Well, yeah,
ride
no,
the bus.
I did make that point. I said a lot of people who are driving and using these garages probably aren't
Right.
paying for a bus fare. They don't have to pay for a bus fare because they got a car.
Right.
And obviously, some people who drive sometimes also take the bus sometimes. But
Right.
what you're saying is everyone else, other people should have to pay to make up the revenue that's lost from
Right.
people who don't want to follow the rules.
Right. And to some degree you're gonna get that, but there's got to be some ways. I think it's a culture issue.
Hmm.
Um, it could be an economics issue because I don't know what the bus fare is these days, but when we looked at the other reports to saying that 50% of people in New York City can't afford basic necessities.
Yeah.
So it could be an economics issue.
Sure.
It's too expensive.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
if it's brought down.
It's the same as a subway, right?
But what if they bring it down? Would that 50% go up, and that could make up for the lost money?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it could be, but there are also programs for people who don't have money, right? People with low
Right.
incomes. So,
But are those even affordable though? Because I know when people talk about affordable housing, they're
yeah,
still talking about paying $2,000 a month rent, and it's like that's affordable. That's
right,
not affordable
right,
for the
right,
majority of people.
right.
So I mean, it's obviously something that they need to look at all the different things, put everything on the table, and see what can be implemented.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. But with this, it would seem you would have to either go one direction or another with it, right? Because if you're making it
Or
free,
try.
I mean, I'm saying if you're going to make it free, then there's no reason to even have fair enforcement because there is no fair,
Right.
right? So,
Or try a few pilot programs
yeah,
here and there and see
yeah.
which one is getting the most
That is
traction.
true. You can try a pilot program of the cop on every bus.
Right.
Try a pilot program of the free line, right? See
Right.
which one seems to work better.
And look at identify the areas of the city that may be evading the fare the most, and then that's where you start with the cop part of it. Right?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
yeah.
see if that works, and then roll it
See if
out.
those numbers, yeah, change and to what degree.
Right.
And then you want to do, I guess, a cost benefit analysis. How much is it costing for the cop versus how much are you saving from the fare evasion, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Can you imagine if that was your job? Like you're a cop and your job is just to ride the bus all day.
Yeah.
8 hours
Right.
is just riding the
And
bus.
catch people trying to cheat the system.
Like just sitting there and just chill. Like
It's like a bouncer for the bus, right? Tossing people off and all that.
right. But $1
Yeah.
billion is of taxpayer funds is not.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
$1
So
billion because people don't want to pay for the bus. Come on.
I'm sure someone would do it though. I mean, sign up for that bus route.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
all right. So let's look at the next
The other
poll here.
poll. Okay.
All right. So the next one we are talking about the mayor's race. And we've got now, Mamdani is the Democratic nominee, and Eric Adams is the incumbent. And he initially said that he was going to run as an independent from jump.
Mhm.
So, he was fine. And Andrew Cuomo was trying to get the nominee, didn't win. And
Right.
now he's coming and saying, I'm going to stay in anyway.
Sure. Although we should make clear that he also petitioned as an independent candidate prior to the primary. So it isn't like he lost the primary, then said, I want another line now. That line was going to be his regardless. Now, he
Right.
did have the option of dropping the line
Right.
after he lost the primary, and he chose to keep it. Right?
Right.
So I just want to be clear that he was petitioning, he did petition to get that independent line and chose to keep it even after losing the primary.
Okay, so I put so the poll question we had was, which of the two candidates do you think should drop out of the mayor's race, Andrew Cuomo or Eric Adams? And I put a couple of different options.
You gave him
here.
cop outs, neither or both.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So Andrew Cuomo,
They're
Eric
gonna
Adams,
say both.
neither or both.
Oh, okay.
All right. So who do you think is going to get them? Which one of these do you think is going to have the most?
I think both wins this poll.
You think both wins this poll? So we had a sizable number of voters.
Yeah.
On this one.
Okay.
So all right. Well, let's see what we got here.
By a landslide.
Both by a land. 68%
Yeah,
said both should drop out.
Yeah.
17% said neither. And then 9% said Andrew Cuomo, 6% said Eric
You
Adams.
see, I wanted people to choose between Cuomo or Adams. If you
Right.
had and then you can look at this and say, well, Cuomo got a slightly higher number here than Adams, so more people thought he should drop out.
Right.
But it's still low. It's still in the single digits, right? The overwhelming majority said both, or neither actually beat as well, which is interesting.
Right.
Neither beat both Cuomo and Adams. So there are more people who think that they both should stay in, according to this, than one should drop out, but not the other.
Right. And then most people think they should both drop out.
Yeah.
And you know,
Yeah, that's the cop out.
it's kind of,
That's
kind
all
of
politicians suck cop out response. You got to
right.
pick
So,
chicken or the steak, guys. That's what's on the menu.
well, let's see what I think the comments here will probably give us a better
Yeah.
idea here. Well, this just says neither will drop out. Nothing about what we observe of their personalities would suggest they would drop out. And
we also should be clear that when we say drop out now, we're talking about still being on the ballot because it'll be too late to get their names off, but not actively campaigning for the seat and potentially even endorsing the other one.
Right. Right.
So again, you said you could see where they were coming from with that?
Yeah, that, they're both strong personalities. And, Adams, I think, to me, Adams I would like him to drop out, but if he doesn't, I can understand why. Because again,
Right.
he said from the jump, this is what I'm doing. Plus, he's the incumbent.
Right. He's the incumbent mayor. And I saw someone make that comment and they were like, it's really ballsy to ask the incumbent and also a black mayor that he should drop out. Someone, made that point as well. I don't know how much credence you want to give that, but they said that it's, for Andrew Cuomo, this white guy who lost the Democratic primary asking the incumbent black mayor to drop out, that didn't sit right with them.
Okay. I didn't even look at it from a race perspective. Right. I looked at it more from the fact that he's the incumbent.
Right.
And, Cuomo is basically saying, hey, look, why don't you drop out?
Yeah.
No, dude, this was the lane I already chose. What are you talking about?
Right. Now, what about this? This came up, and I don't know if this is still even a thing, but I did see a report that Cuomo was going to propose that whoever was leading by September would become the candidate and the others would drop out.
Right.
To face Mamdani. So either basically Adams or Cuomo will be dropping out, and I guess the other independents who aren't really talked about, but there will be one main independent candidate to be the alternative to Mamdani. I thought that was interesting. Like I kind of understood. No, he said no way.
Adam said no way.
I kind of understood where he came from with that idea, but I also thought it was a bad idea optically. I mean, like I got it. They wanted the one, and who's going to be the stronger one? Okay,
but they make it sound like they're on the same team to destroy Mamdani,
and that's what it is. It actually makes Mamdani seem more powerful, more empathetic. I think. I think you know what I mean. Like I think it's kind of counterproductive if you're trying to be a strong alternative to him. You're almost elevating his status by doing that. There are so many issues with it. I mean, okay, who's leading by September? According to what metric? It's not like all the polls are necessarily going to say the same thing. Right. Sometimes people hire a polling company to ask the question a certain way to make them look better, or sometimes you get different data from different polls. Are you cherry picking which ones are you using? And then when you say who's leading, okay, what if they're both trailing Mamdani? Are they both losing, or are you just saying whichever ones are higher than the other?
Well, that's what he was saying.
What if it's within the margin of error? Right. You know what I mean? Like it's just. To me, that wasn't a good look. But I was thinking of this, and I don't know if he meant it this way, maybe as some kind of like Jedi mind trick. It was a good thing knowing that wasn't going to happen, right? Knowing Adams wouldn't go for that. He brought that up maybe to plant the seed in people's minds that they should be looking at the polling, right? So that maybe he's thinking, okay, Adams ain't going to go for it. He's going to stay in the race regardless. But if I put this idea out there, maybe come September, when the polls start to hopefully crystallize a little bit, they'll start to coalesce behind me if I'm winning. I mean, maybe that's what he's thinking.
It could be. It could be. I think I think I have to look again, but I think Adam said something like that's kind of arrogant to say, to even propose this.
Yeah.
Like, why would you tell me to drop out because it's not fitting the way that you think it should be run? Right. And listen, they're not on the same team, right? They're running to represent themselves in different lanes.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like they're both trying for the primary of one Democratic lane. It's, it doesn't put them on I don't think Adams is specifically on the anti-Mamdani train. He's just running.
I think it's the lightning rod effect that we've talked about. Mamdani because of the lane that he's in, is such a major lightning rod that
Right.
it's kind of like it's him versus the anti-him at this point. So
Right.
in a sense, whether Cuomo and Adams want to be, they kind of are in that same lane. They're in the anti-Mamdani voter lane, if that makes sense.
But
So
I don't
I
think
think they share a lot of the same would-be voters.
I don't think Adams went in as the anti-Mamdani
No,
lane.
he went in as the mayor running for re-election.
Right. And so like
Yeah,
for him to agree to Cuomo's proposal
right.
would be like, oh yeah, we're on the same team, kind of,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
we're both here to displace him to
right,
so
right.
that we can take
And
the
that
seat.
makes Mamdani look more like the incumbent, not Adams. Adams
Absolutely.
will be actually lowering his own
Yeah.
level by doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, I'm the one in the seat. What are you talking about?
Right, right. There should be an anti-incumbent lane, if anything.
Yeah.
You guys should be fighting for the same voters.
Right. Yeah, I'm the guy to beat.
What happened to the anti-Adams people, right?
Yeah. You propose that to Mamdani. I'm
right,
the one to
right,
beat guy.
Right, right.
So
listen, I do think it is true that with both of them in there, right, but there's no ranked choice voting in general election.
Right.
No ranked choice voting, right? So with both of them in there trying to fight for a share of the same voters, yes, it does help Mamdani in November ultimately.
Right.
But we'll see how the polls, I guess, shape up. Maybe like we saw in the primary, maybe people will coalesce behind one of these candidates as we head into the fall.
Yeah. So some of this, here we go. Why are you asking the question? It is irrelevant because neither of them, nor Sliwa or Walden, will. It also implies one of them should remain in the race. I'm at a loss to understand why.
Well, we're asking the question: what do the people think?
And because it kind of was proposed by Cuomo,
right?
Because he said, "Listen, come closer to the election time. If one of us is losing, the other should that person should drop out."
Right. And even before he proposed that was the discussion, right?
Yeah.
Which is the candidate, who's going to be the alternative?
Right. Right. Someone said it's up to them, not us. I'd love to see them both disappear from politics immediately and permanently.
Wow.
But it's really neither here nor there. But you know what? I think a lot of people do feel that way. Eric Adams, especially the sour taste he's left in people's mouth with the investigation and cozying up to the Trump administration, and in Cuomo, the bad blood from when he was previously in office and coming back, and that there, plus you add on top of that, a lot of people are like, why do we keep seeing the same faces over and over again?
Mm-hmm.
I can see people feeling that way. Like, why don't you both go away and let's get somebody new in here?
Yeah.
So one question, who is Walden? I haven't heard that name.
He is an independent candidate. Actually, he is interesting. He's an attorney.
Democrat or Republican? He said independent.
He's an independent. I believe he was a Democrat, but recently changed over to maybe years ago, changed over to independent. He was the attorney. Okay, here's an interesting one. Actually, he actually hired me to do some work on his behalf. But
okay,
do you ever see the movie Molly Bloom? Or I think it's about I don't forget what it's called, but about Molly Bloom. Have you ever heard of Molly Bloom?
Wasn't it the place we performed at?
Yeah, but I don't think there's any relation to her. So she was a woman who hosted poker games, believe it or not, and made a lot of money running underground poker rooms around New York. There was a movie made about her. I think it's called maybe A Perfect Game, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds familiar.
It's an Aaron Sorkin film.
Okay.
It's on Netflix. You can watch it. It was also a famous book. So I think it was called Molly's Game. That's what it was called.
Okay.
I think it was called Molly's Game, now that I think of it. So she ended up getting prosecuted for running this underground poker ring, which was actually very big. A lot of famous actors went to play there, ball players, right? It was like a very big room. Now, the issue with it was, as far as I recall, and I don't know, it's been a while since I watched the movie and everything, but that she was generating a profit off of it. So it wasn't just like a home game, which, all right, it's like whatever, it doesn't really matter. But it was that she was actually running it like a casino, right, that kind of thing. And so she was prosecuted for it. Anyway, her lawyer who defended her in that case was Jim Walden.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so how's he looking in the polls?
Not viable.
Not exempt.
Yeah. No, like 0%, 1%.
Okay. All right. Just some more people here. Let them both stay in. It will actually help the nominee if the independent vote is split. Okay. It's a way to look at it. Someone said this would be a non-problem if NY used ranked choice voting in the general. So
a non-problem, I would say maybe less of a problem. I don't think a non-problem, though. Everyone assumes ranked choice voting is like a magic bullet that just saves everything. No, people still are in the same lanes. People still can split votes, right? Yes, I understand what they're saying. If you rank Cuomo 1, Adams 2, whatever, when Adams is gone, Cuomo's gone, your vote goes to Adams or whatever. But it doesn't work out that cleanly all the time.
Right. Yeah.
People may not like the other one and not rank him at all.
Right. And someone mentioned, like, in that case, it might give Cuomo or Adams, probably Cuomo, a better shot at winning, as would one of them dropping out. In the current scenario, they are splitting the centrist vote.
Yeah.
So we have another comment. ¿Por qué no los dos?
Why not the both of them?
Why not both?
Yeah. Why not the two?
This was one here. This is one interesting to me, and I think it kind of raised this in the discussion we had last time.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. I thought Democrats were supposed to stick together, to unite. I thought progressives, the working class, and the youth are supposed to vote blue no matter what. And
do you see the problem? We mentioned this last time. The problem with this line of thinking, yeah. I think it's disingenuous.
Well, okay. Tell me why you think it's disingenuous. Because I can see that, but
because there are people trying to hijack the Democratic line who don't even identify as Democrats. Many people in this lane will tell you that. It's kind of part of their philosophy. We're not really Democrats. We're just running on it at political expediency. And now you want people who are actually Democrats to be forced to back people who are hijacking their party. They're really a third party running with one of the major parties because they think it's easier to win that way, right? So it isn't like these candidates necessarily match the values and the viewpoints of the voters. So why are you trying to force the voters to support these candidates who are so outside that their lane they don't even consider themselves Democrats most of the time?
I can see that. But if the Democratic voters selected them for that, mm-hmm. then isn't that where the will of the voters are at?
That's interesting. So you think that the Democrats, even ones who are more, let's say, centrist or mainstream, right?
Right.
They don't agree with a candidate like Mamdani, but they should be asked to vote for him regardless to honor what their fellow Democrats collectively did.
Well, I think if you're talking vote blue no matter who or vote blue no matter mm-hmm. what, and uniting to make sure that a Republican doesn't take it, yeah. then yes, in that category. It depends on what where your priorities are. I mean,
there are people calling this guy a commie, so they would say he's not blue, he's red.
It's not even like that's another thing. It's kind
of right. I'm being a little facetious, but you do hear that kind of thing.
Yeah. But listen, the majority of the Democratic Party voted for that.
Well, the people who showed up to vote,
to vote, and the ones who didn't show up to vote, then you know what, it's kind of your fault if you don't like it the way it's at. I think to me, this is one of the reasons what I'm seeing here is one of the reasons why Democrats are having such a hard time. He won, and now they're mounting somewhat of an opposition so that he can't take the mantle, even though he won. Instead of coalescing together and saying, listen, this is what we're gonna win, and then let's work with him.
But why do people want Democrats to only do that when their candidates win? Because you have to realize that people in this lane, right, on this kind of far left progressive side of things right now, they see Democrats as their main competition. Now, part of that is just the dynamics of New York City politics, right? Because it's a very blue city on the whole. And so most of the districts are Democratic districts. There's no serious Republican candidate in most districts. So yeah, the only election is Democrat versus Democrat. And so it becomes a matter of which flavor of Democrat do you prefer, right? That's usually how it works out. Nonetheless, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing most of the candidates, most of the energy in this lane focused on taking down what they would considered to be old school or mainstream or centrist or traditional establishment Democrats, right? So they're not casting the battle in terms of Democrat versus Republican. They're casting it in terms of themselves versus Democrats. And so now you're saying that, well, when they win, the Democrats they spent all their energy attacking should be forced to get behind them. But notice they don't get behind Democrats, the more mainstream Democrats when they win a lot of the times, right? Like they wouldn't back Hillary, too many of them, right? The same thing with Joe Biden. A lot of them were pissy about that, even though a lot did come out to vote against Trump, So absolutely. Why is it that they want to have it one way, but not the other way?
Right. But I see that also as, a symptom of why Democrats are having a rough time. And we saw this right with the Bernie Bros, right? who are like, well, Bernie's not the candidate, we're just not going to vote.
Right.
It's like, no, you're supposed to. Yeah, I see you wanted Bernie.
Yeah.
Bernie's a great candidate. I see you wanted Bernie,
Yeah.
but he didn't win. And now the active threat is this candidate over here, and you're in this camp.
Right.
Even if you're frustrated with the camp, and I understand the frustration, but now the clear and present danger is this.
Yeah.
We need to come together.
And that's the problem. They don't seem to see it that way. So it's like,
but see,
they're not extending the olive branch, but when they, especially when they lose, but when they win, they want the people that they beat to do it.
And that's what I think is the problem that the Democratic Party is having. The Republican Party, as crazy as it's gone, and the establishment, a lot of establishment guys may not like where it's at right now, but they do coalesce together when it comes to beating the opposition.
Right.
And that's why
But you see the difference there, because even though they're infighting, they still consider themselves Republican at the end of the day.
Sure.
A lot of these people on the left do not, right? They're saying they're hijacking, they're co-opting the Democratic Party. They don't consider themselves real Democrats.
I think
so. Why should they have, in their minds, why should they have to get behind their party? It's not even their party, according to them.
I see that.
Yeah.
I think, though, the equivalent is probably also happening on the Republican side. They're just not using different terms. Right. So on the Democratic side, you've got people that say, well, we are true blue Democrats.
Right.
And you've got, I'm a Democratic socialist. Yeah, I'm a progressive. And they've got these different terms for it. On the Republican side, I think what you're seeing is people like the establishment Republicans and these legacy Republicans versus the MAGA Republicans. They're calling themselves Republicans, but the MAGA Republicans are trying to transform what that means to be a Republican. So it's basically the same thing.
Yes, but at the end of the day,
using this name.
At the end of the day, they're still voting for the Republican nominee.
That's
Democrats are not as much.
That's what the issue is there. Even if they're infighting themselves, because we've seen
they could be infighting.
The Tea Party came out, and everyone's like, "Wow, they're eating their own head."
And that's in the primary.
Right.
But come general election,
they
who are
come
they voting?
Together.
They're voting for the Republican candidate.
And so that's what the Democrats need, and that's where I see an issue with these different candidates trying, or the Democratic Party trying to find a way to go around Mamdani taking the lead.
But what I'm saying is, though, it's harder for Democrats to do it than it is for Republicans to do it. But what I mean is to come together at the end of the day. It's harder for Democrats to do it right now because they basically have two parties. It's basically a third party saying we're running as Democrats versus the traditional Democrats, and they're just too divided in that way.
But it's the same thing in the Republican.
It's not the same thing.
I wouldn't and the regular Republicans.
They're not a third party. They still call themselves Republicans.
Yeah, sure. They still call
people on the left say they're not even Democrats a lot of the time.
But they're functionally
they're socialists. It's a different thing.
But functionally, the MAGA Republicans and the Republicans.
I get it. There are differences there, and that's always been the case with the parties, right? Like you can go back to Teddy Roosevelt's time. He was a progressive Republican fighting the more mainstream conservative Republicans. That's always happened.
But when it comes to showtime,
right?
And that's where I think Democrats need to get on board,
because I think there's more of a divide in the Democratic Party.
Okay. At the end of the day, if they want to win, and I think the establishment Democrats, the True Blues, I think the progressives, the Democratic Socialists, I think all of them would disagree with how the Republican candidate wants to push things.
Sure, but
so that's where they should find that common ground.
But in this case, if you're take the political considerations out for a second, take out the pressure to back your team or your party or your color, right? Look at it in terms of which candidate most closely aligns with my values, my beliefs, right? I think looking at this field, a lot of the more mainstream Democrats would think Cuomo or Adams actually would, then Mamdani. And that's why there's, I think, a movement to try to support someone else. It isn't like the goal here is for a Democrat to win no matter what. The goal is to get someone in office that they think represents their values and can do a good job as mayor.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm not sure how close like this three-way split could elevate Sliwa to potentially win,
right?
To make it where this could be a real issue, right? If it was something that was kind of close, then this would be much more of a contentious thing. Like what we were seeing in the presidential election. It was really close. You need to get on board because there's a real chance that
there's no room for error.
Right. There's no time to play games here. I don't know if it's that, it
doesn't appear to be, right? If you look at the current numbers, you would think there might be a danger.
Right.
So as far, it doesn't appear that that's happening.
Right. So in this case, the kind of infighting
Yeah.
or whatever may be a little moot, but I think it
Yeah.
is
No, I
indicative of
understand
a
what you mean.
bigger
Right,
problem.
the larger issue.
Yeah.
Did you see what happened in Buffalo a couple of years back? I wanted to bring this up.
No, someone mentioned
Oh, really?
we've seen this before in this state in
Oh, there
Buffalo.
you go. Yeah.
What's this about?
So the incumbent mayor, who was more of a mainstream traditional Democrat, right,
Uh-huh.
if you want to say, lost the primary to a Democratic socialist who I don't think was ever in office before. I think it was a nurse,
Okay.
believe it or not. I think her name was India Walton, but
AOC? No,
no, Buffalo, Buffalo, way
okay,
out.
okay, okay.
So she won the Democratic primary over the incumbent mayor. It was a big shocker,
Right.
right? And she ended up losing the general election to the incumbent mayor who ran, I believe, as a write-in candidate. Now that's more feasible in
Interesting.
Buffalo than it would be in New York City, for example, where
Okay.
there's so many, more millions of people, right?
Right.
But the general election, even though Buffalo is a Democratic city, the general election electorate didn't go for the Democratic Socialist candidate and wanted to keep their
Right.
more traditional Democratic mayor in. So
Right.
they wrote him in and he won.
Okay. Well, I wonder also, would I don't know if I see that happening for Adams,
With a write-in, you
but
mean, or you mean just winning in terms of independent?
right.
Yeah.
I just don't see it in the cards. I think what's going to be interesting here, and it's already interesting here,
Yeah.
is one, the amount of people that Mamdani has electrified to come out and participate,
Mm-hmm.
and the amount of people that are non-Mamdani supporters, maybe the main establishment Democrats
Right.
that didn't even show up to vote in the primary.
Sure.
And so,
But let's also add in people who are not Democrats who are now in the equation. They
right.
couldn't vote in the primary.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I'm just like, as far as wanting the Democratic candidate that aligns with this traditional
Mm-hmm.
view, those supporters didn't show up in the
Not
numbers
enough
to
of
make
them.
them
Not
to
enough of
make
them
them
did.
win.
Right. In the primary. Not enough.
And so that, I think that says something as well.
Sure.
You know,
Sure. At least it says where the energy is or was on that day. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think as the Democratic Party, that all of this is something, of course, they need to look at.
And that's why I was saying that there's a danger here if the prevailing narrative becomes this is just where the Democrats on the whole are now, right? In more swing districts, that could be a problem, right? Especially when you have, for example, a city council race, which is happening on the same day as the mayor's race. And so if people are coming out in droves to vote against a mayor they think is an extremist, most of them are going to vote down ballot to the same party, right?
Right.
You can try to get your crossover votes, and sometimes candidates do it with varying degrees of success, but it definitely hurts you. Like if you're a Democrat running a local race, if there are droves of people coming out just to vote for a Republican for mayor, it's going to hurt the Democrats down ballot as well.
Oh, yeah. So this is going to be an interesting thing. So again, also good conversations that took place. What is this? God, Bill Ackman and Michael Bloomberg setting all their money on fire to defeat Zoran and failing is going to be so satisfying. Listen, he's got a lot of supporters that are coming out, talking their talk. We'll see what happens in the general if he can hold on to it.
Right.
But I'm kind of looking forward to seeing it. I know
it's easy for you to say not living in New York City.
Sure. And I was going to say that I'm a little bit outside of it.
It's almost like a troll stance. Like let's just see what happens.
To some degree, but I think I'm probably a little bit more on the progressive, further progressive than you in many regards.
In some regards, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, because I like the Squad. I like AOC. I like Bernie. I like these types of things because I think there's a lot of shaking up that needs to happen on the Democratic side. I think they've been, in general, that party has been what has moved the country forward across the board, but they've been failing in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
On their watch, we're talking on the last 25 years. Look at how much we've lost, right? With the Supreme Court letting people vote as humans, with losing affirmative action, with the gutting of the Voting Rights Act,
right,
with Roe v. Wade going down the tubes, with all the rise of MAGA, allowing them to win in that regard.
But see, I think that the Republicans are going to have even bigger wins if more of these candidates rise to prominence. And I thought that after Kamala lost, there was a bit of an awakening period, of a reckoning, where the Democrats were like, you know what, maybe we need to moderate a little bit because we've gone too far. And if you keep getting stuff like this, I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
It's going to be tough to take back the House. It's going to be really, really tough, I think, in the midterms on us
It could
next
be.
year.
And another way of looking at it though, like if you want to compare like the far right and the far left
Yeah.
as being the outsiders of the
Right.
core,
Right.
that move to the far right has worked a lot for the Republicans. Could it also do the same for the Democrats?
It's interesting, right? Like
Yeah.
that's worked so well for them, even though most voters would tell you that they're somewhere in the middle. Most voters will tell you, and you know what? I've really wrestled with this, even locally in New York City, because I've done my share of polling locally on issues, right? And you ask people how they feel about different issues in the city. You ask them how do they identify themselves politically.
Right.
If you're a Democratic primary voter, tell me, are you considered progressive, moderate, or conservative by your own standards, right? How do you describe yourself?
Right.
Most of the people in South Queens, even in, by the way, areas where Mamdani won, right? I'm talking areas like Richmond Hill. I'm talking about Ozone Park, Woodhaven, right? You ask them how do they identify, and you poll them on the issues, and most of them are moderate to even a little bit conservative. Now, you do have about maybe a quarter who would say they're progressive, right? 75% would say they're between moderate and conservative. And yet, they'll still vote at times for that progressive candidate. Now, is that a matter of the voters not knowing where these candidates stand ideologically, or are they overlooking it? Are they voting for them for some other reason? Right?
Messaging, I think, is
Yeah.
And we've talked about like how a lot of Democrats fail in messaging. Maybe this is where Mamdani was able to shine and get some of those voters to tick that box.
It's energy, right? It's turnout, because
right.
you can't presume that 100% of the voters are going to vote, as we saw.
And didn't he get
about 30% of the primary electorate?
But didn't he get like a record-breaking
is.
number of people to come out or something in that regard? I think I read something about that.
He did get more. I don't know if it was record-breaking, but he did get more
than the last couple of elections or something like that.
Yes.
So, maybe that
but it was
something
more,
he said resonated.
It was more of the young people, though.
Right.
Yeah. More of the young people voted than usual. So that's where the energy was.
Yeah. Right. So we're going to see how that all plays out.
Yeah.
Very interesting, and a lot of good conversation on the topic. So
yeah.
All right, so
what is the bottom line?
I was just going to ask you the same thing. What is the bottom line?
I mean, we started off talking about election law and potential discriminatory effects there.
Right.
We went to the fair evasion issue and should buses be free? Right. And now we're talking about who should drop out of the mayor's race. I mean, we've had a very diverse, varied discussion here.
Is it about access? Access to the ballot, access to democratic rights, access to
the bus,
affordability,
right.
Affordable living, access.
Well, I see where you're going.
You know what I mean? Like, could it all be tied together with opening up access to people, to the citizens, to be able to live that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness?
I like that. I actually like that. Open up access, but do it in a responsible way, right? That ties to all of these conversations where there should be some bar, and we can have discussion and debate as to how high or where that bar should be set. Right. So yes, I do like where you're going with that. Right. We want more access, but we want to make sure that it isn't unfettered. I guess that there are some checks still, because that actually benefits everyone as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So sounds good, and I think people should check us out on social media, YouTube at Nuance Show, Facebook as well, and everywhere podcasts are available.
Yes, absolutely. As always, we've got work to do, whether in person or remotely, right? And we'll catch you next time. Thank you all.